Get
And then this becomes our good.
Yeah.
This becomes our good
Call the meeting to order.
This is-
All rise for the pledge.
Okay, all right.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Can we have a roll call?
Yes, we can. As soon as I get my document notes. Okay. Good there, sorry.
You're all right.
There we go. There we are. Okay. Wonder Jim.
Here.
Vanek here. Steffes. Absent. Gardine. Here. Campbell. Here. Dehan.
Here.
Hybor.
Here. We have a quorum. Please note, as a courtesy to members of the audience, the Board of Education, please silence your cell phone. The public will only be able to speak during public comment if signed up. Do we have any forms? All right, fantastic, thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Consent action agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Support.
All those in favor? Yes.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. On to item number 3, the reports and discussion. We're going to start with 3A, the back to school update.
Well, we are in August, and I'm pumped. We had all of our secretaries in this morning, and when I first started, we would keep them here for an entire day. And I think it was maybe my second year as an assistant soup, and they said, "Can we dial this back? We have so much to do. Can we condense it?" So now it's condensed to a morning. We get like 3.5 hours. I even heard Scott saying outside, like, feels like we hit them with a fire hose for 3.5 hours, and then they go back. But I think that's how they prefer, right? Can you give us all the information that we need? Let us get back and start working in it. Some of the shifting that they learned about was just how we have shifted a little bit, how we are functioning through enrollment. You'll note last year we reduced our enrollment coordinator role. And so our building secretaries are taking a little bit more of an active approach to enrollments that are ongoing. We've done a great job using Jill Wolfert and Sarah Masco this summer to help come in over the summer and to just help process some of those and learn how that feels from a building secretary piece. And then they're kind of coaching their peers, which is great. We learned a lot about talking points. That has been something that Scott has really been diving in on and continuing to kind of process and work our way through so that by the time we have to be certain that the messages go out that we're ready to go. So they learned about those things. Our administrative retreat is tomorrow. So our whole principal team plus our supervisors are headed down to Gun Lake. We spend in the morning the vast amount of our time talking about, like we had talked about in this spring, all of our Tier 1 instruction, the guaranteed and Bible curriculum work that we dug into. I'm going to spend some time working through working through a process around consensus and managing conflict as it relates to the curricular work. So it comes right out of the Learning by Doing book from Marzano, which is kind of the playbook that we use in the tool. And so took some things from not only that book, but several other supporting documents related to that piece of it. How do you find consensus, and what does consensus actually mean, and how can we find a working definition of that as a group? And when there's conflict, what are the things that tools and strategies that you can use to help a group move forward? Because in many cases, like our case, especially at the K-4 level, we'll have principals leading a grade level that don't have really close relationships with all the staff inside that grade level. And so we want to try to make sure that we can equip them not only with how to do that with a bunch of folks that they don't know as well, but then you get all K-4 coming back and they're having dialogue around what their group did. It'll be very similar, but there's always tweaks and adjustments individually in those meetings. And so just trying to help give them some of the tools and strategies to land in that place, which I'm really excited about. and our supervisors come in the tail end of the day, and we work through all the budget pieces and those kinds of things with them, and it just gives us a really quick start to our year. Added sections at Grandville and South in third grade. They were both sitting at a count of 28 per classroom. The class limit there is 26. So even from 2 weeks ago when we met with the folks from Grandville, kind of waited, we were able to move some students out of those spaces. We were able to find students that weren't coming back, and we had lots of additional enrollments. And I think that's really the cool part, is it feels as though from an enrollment standpoint, we're slightly ahead of where we've been previously, particularly in the kindergarten area. I think last year around this time we had about 200 to 250 kindergartners enrolled, and then it just went whoosh. But for whatever reason, this summer has been a little better. So middle school and high school class sections are also a little bit larger than we've had in the recent past. When I first started in middle school teaching, and then when I moved into the high school administratively, they were many of them as large as they will be this school year. But again, we're also trying to figure out drops and adds before we make any real move related to adding a section or moving kids. We're just trying to make sure we are fiscally responsible and we're giving that best educational opportunity for kids. And so we're working hard to not make drastic decisions that create chaos right at the end.
Do we ever, this is a question I don't know the answer at all, but do we ever move school of choice students based on like a head count? Like if you
100%.
So if you're way too high and you have several school of choice at Century Park, you can move them?
Yeah. So last week, 2 weeks ago, Wednesday, after our board meeting, Tuesday, we sat down and we said, okay, Holly, show us all the students that you've assigned school of choice to these buildings, because we haven't communicated those yet. And we said, all right, so how many of the students at this building don't have siblings at that building? These ones. All right, then we can assign them over here. Unless they happen to live like up by Cummings. So we don't want to assign somebody who lives north of the river to an open spot south of the river, right? So there are some geographic considerations that we have there also, but that's part of the reason why our school of choice students don't learn their placement until later, is we're waiting to see what enrollments come in and what adjustments we can make and how we can slide students around to find that balance. So 100% we do that. And obviously you can't do that 5-12 as much, but certainly at the K-4 level, we hold off until much later to give them their notice so that we can do that.
John, I think the question he was asking, tell me if I'm wrong, is so let's say you assign somebody to Central the first year.
Yep.
Do you ever move them once they've hit a building? Is that really where
Well, that would be like the follow-up question.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought of it until that question was
Right.
asked, but then do you ever move a school of choice student?
Sometimes.
Okay.
And so those are direct conversations. Like we make a phone call to that parent and say, hey, our in-school numbers are rising. We have openings here. This is what it could mean for your child. Are you open and willing? Because they're doing the transportation for that. And we've even done it where we've communicated, hey, you're going to go to West right at the end of the school, before the school year. We get an influx in that grade level, and we call that parent and say, hey, we need you to now go here. And so
Okay.
we even do some like last minute after we've notified them that they're going to a building.
Yeah.
We might call several of them and say, hey, we need you to move, and here's why we need you to move, because it's a class number piece.
I was curious if we use that to manage
Yeah.
these class sizes, so I'm glad we do.
Yep.
And it's also nice from my side with that question is you're always putting district kids first.
Correct. Yep. And Scott typically ends up being the one who makes that call for the district. He just does a great job of being able to communicate to parents what's there and what's not there. And that elementary background for him certainly helps. And so he's done that, the last 8 years at least, when I've been here, has been the person who's been reaching out to our parents on the school of choice and reorganizing where we need to. So that's a great question.
All right, thank you. Sorry I interrupted.
That was good. That was about where I was wrapping that up, because the enrollment piece right now is our biggest target, right? Like we're excited to see that that the numbers are bigger than we kind of anticipated they would be. But it also tweaks with the planning that you had put in place a couple of months ago. And so now we're just trying to be very smart and strategic about where we're making shifts and adjustments to that work. So
Any sense as to the why? Why it's higher?
I have no idea. There have been years where we have gotten, people have come in like they have this year and have been coming in really steady, and there have been other years where it was August 10 and 150 people enrolled. And so we're hoping that's not the case well, maybe we are hoping it's the case this year, but that's what adds that added complexity. So I'm not sure what's different about this year in terms of the timing of it comparatively.
Yeah.
So what I'm excited about is in a state, in a county where enrollment is declining in a lot of spaces,
Right.
that we're still a destination that people want to come to.
Right.
And they're putting their name in early and often because
Right.
they really want to be here.
That's excellent.
How
So,
are our Young Five numbers looking?
so we'll have currently 19 at Central, so there's room to add a few there if we need to.
Okay.
And Scott has been making phone calls at the other buildings to parents that had kind of indicated they wanted Young K to say, here are the options that you have. Would you like to be at your home school with the gift of another year if you wish, or would you like the true Young K experience? And if so, we can have you go to Central. And so most of our kiddos that land in that space stay in their home buildings.
Okay.
And then in terms of balance, I looked at the numbers this morning because the EA had asked me to take a look at those in some of the buildings for the Young Kers. And probably the maximum, if you look at like a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio, where like 25% of your kids may have qualified for Young K and the other 75% would be kindergarten. And we have said regularly, if the numbers dictate that we need to add a third section or a fourth section or a fifth section, and that fifth section can be populated by kiddos that are Young K, we'll do it. Right? We'll do it. But if we have 40 kiddos in the 2-section building and 8 of them identified that they want Young K option, fiscally it makes a whole lot more sense for us to stay with 2 sections and 4 kids in each classroom that might be Young K.
Yeah, I just wondered where those numbers went.
Yep,
this year,
and I know
how they
last
went.
year Century Park ran that as a blended model because their Young K numbers were very low. And they had 7 of their kiddos that would have been Young K that went up to first grade. So they found success immersed in that kindergarten
Sure. Kind of
experience.
a Montessori kind of concept, right?
Yeah, yep.
And has
Yep.
that been shared, because I know there's other schools that were concerned about that. Does that get shared then with them so that they might be able to implement some of the, successful things that they did at Century Park?
Yeah.
and to-
Yep, our principals talk about it and kind of embed and work through what they did in those spaces. And
We have teachers with students who
Yep.
had great success with that too. So it's nice to have all the voices in the room.
Yep.
And yeah.
And the decision to go from, if you're a person who would have been Young K, the decision for you to go from even Young K to first grade, when we've done that a few times, or you're a Young K student in a kindergarten classroom, it's made in conjunction with the family.
Yeah.
Here's all the evidence, here's all the data, here's where we believe that your child is, here's where we think they can learn and grow. And so it is a very open dialogue that I think is really beneficial.
Yeah. Thanks.
So I know we haven't started 2026 yet, but I have an eye on all the development going on around. I mean, any sense on when any of that's going to start coming online and
No, I'm going to get a hold of Griffin.
Yeah.
He and I haven't had our conversation yet this month, and so we need to get something on the calendar. But that's something I'm going to ask him about. I also want to ask him about when 52nd Street's going to be done, if he has a sense of that, or get a hold of Wyoming and see when we know that's going to be done, because
yeah.
we need that done before Grandview starts. It'll be a mess. It was a mess at Central trying to get
Right.
our people in for like summer meal program, that
Yeah.
limited amount of time that we had Prairie tore up by the fire station. But
Yeah.
yeah, we need that to get get wrapped up.
And it's just weird because I don't know what the plan is for the road commission, but I just noticed like it's been moving north, like from the south end of Kent County. Like when I drive through that all the way down to Allegan, it's like it continues to move north, and they just shut down 70 or 68, 70, one of those. They just shut it down. I'm like, what in the world's going on? I'm like, how do I get through here? So it was just all over the place.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're doing more and more roads all the way up to M6 and they're going to leapfrog it at some point or what, but I don't know. It was just kind of.
I know that they were laying some pretty large sewer lines out that way too. So
Yeah, anyway, it's been a mess out there. How about construction of like a new units? Like I know the one up by Standale and Meyer is kicking off and it's going, and the developments around, by Grandville, right? And
Yeah.
so forth. I guess what's any sense on those?
So what we try to do is to track, like with the new ones, especially south of town, as they finish, what does that do for our counts? And it has not yet had a significant impact. On the flip side, when we moved our 5, 6 out, we have a lot of room to grow.
Yeah.
Right? So from a facility standpoint, we're in a good spot in that space. But we don't have a real good sense of how many young families are moving in. Are they elementary families?
Yeah.
Are they coming in at the high school level? That's the part that trying to get data and navigate.
Yeah. It'll be interesting, the one up by us. I don't know if it's going to be more college students or if it'll be,
It'll
young
probably be a
professionals or
mix
mix. Yeah.
from
yeah.
what I've seen with the ones that have gone up in the
Yeah.
Standale area. It's
Yeah.
a pretty big mix
Yeah.
of families and college.
Yeah, that'll be interesting up there.
Because that's a lot of units that they're putting in, I think.
Yeah.
Do these developers tout Grandville schools as being I would imagine as being a positive to?
Probably when it gets time. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
I think they
So
did.
it'd be
when-
not kind of nice if they're going to do that, if they
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
like then share data with us.
Is that
Who's
construction
coming
that's
in?
over by the library also housing
By the library.
here in
Oh, in
Grandville?
town?
Yeah, in town.
Oh, yeah.
I thought Griffin said that was like mixed use, so I think they are gonna have some
Okay.
apartments up top,
Okay.
but then down
Maybe
below is
some
supposed to be
business.
like storefront businesses,
Oh,
is
okay.
what I understood, but
Kinda like what
I
Hudson
can
Village
touch up a
had,
bit
yeah, okay.
there too, yeah.
All right, interesting.
Yep.
Good. Any other comments, questions? Back to school. All right. 3B, data presentation.
So I asked both Scott and Adam to kind of pull the data together and to send it to you before we met today. Part of that was to give you an opportunity to digest it. They're going to kind of hit some of the high points, so they're going to probably skip over some of the graphs that are there because you've had a chance to look at them, right? But then obviously if you need them to zoom back to one, or you highlighted something in your documents that you want to look back at, we will have that available too. So my suggestion was put it all in one place, but hit the highlights because we've already shared the data out.
I really appreciated having this
Yeah.
early.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
really
this
love
was
that.
really
Yeah.
helpful, really clear.
Yep.
Good. Well, our goal, thank you, and we're always excited to share this, but our goal, as I thought about it, is to really make this a 3-part series, linking to last time we talked about QPD, and not to go backwards, but to link to that QPD and talk about how all of these things are together, and then our next presentation in the future, not maybe necessarily the next board meeting, but soon, is we always do an annual MTSS update, and Jason and I have had conversation about really making our next update a picture of what our data review looks like. Just to give you all an idea of when our teams meet together 3 times a year to dig into the data, what does that look like to get to some of these results? And so our goal here, and Adam and I talked about this, was to really be strategic in providing a lot of data, because I know some of you love the pages, right? Some like to be succinct. So to try to find a balance in and around that data that does highlight some of the positive things, the main elements, without just cherry picking and spotlighting on small things, giving a broad perspective of the positives, while also giving a realistic, fair picture of the things that we know we still need work on. We want to be honest and upfront. We feel like we always are about that. We try not to shy away because that's where our improvement comes from. So stop me at any time. This is not going to be a repeat at all of what you got in your packet, but what you got hopefully highlighted those two things, and we talk about this a lot, right? The achievement versus growth. That where are we? And the 60th percentile, I will tell you, is an increase for us over the last 6 to 8 years. We have bumped that up from our national norms from the 40th percentile, using the 50th percentile as at grade level. We're raising the bar and having our people really look at that 60th percentile because nobody raises themselves up to low expectations, right? So we want to do that. And then growth, the conditional growth percentile, that 50 means, are we growing at the same level as the national norm? Well, we want to be better than that. We expect to be better than that. And we did see that in a lot of places, and we have some areas where we didn't. We know that over time, that drops in our grades. Our youngest learners are growing the most, and we dip off a little bit. Our conditional growth percentiles there at 59 and 63 are above the national average, and that's a district-wide. You saw that in your packet, that we have some pockets that are really growing high, and some areas that are really easy to see that we need to work on. So looking at that, we talked about this last year. I shared last year that our elementary math numbers were the highest they've been in 10 to 12 years. They continue to do that. And this is something I don't think we can state enough. 43 to 47%. That's almost half of our kids are in the 80th percentile at those lower levels. That's incredible in terms of high achievement. But then it drops, and that's a big concern. So where? Well, we know. I take that back. We know where. Why and how are we losing those kids in math? Is a big focus area for us. And then our struggling readers grew faster than their peers nationally. K4, 58 to 79% of higher than normal growth, and that's amazing. And then again, it drops off when we get to that middle school age. We have strong evidence that we know our intervention is working, but we have said for years now, you can't intervene your way out of a core problem, of a core instruction problem. By statistics, you shouldn't have more than 20% of your kids in intervention, and we've really challenged our schools over the last 2 to 3 years. There was a point where one of our schools had about 42% of their kids they were trying to get into Tier 2. You just can't do it. And so we need to be more efficient and better with our core instruction for all kids, and then addressing those issues of why are we losing kids as they get up to those middle ranges. This graph I liked once I understood it and put it together myself, and then I looked at it and I thought, wait a minute, I just confused myself again. So what it means is we're gaining at all levels. So our highest distribution is growing and our lowest distribution is shrinking. So our kids who are at the lowest tier, we're making improvements. And we are growing at the highest levels, which is good. Now, the honest piece is we know that growing well is not the same as reaching benchmark. So if you have a child that is at the 5th percentile, right? They're behind multiple years. They have to have more than a year's growth to catch up to grade level. And they have to have that significantly. And so we know that, what our data tells us, we know that our kids in those ranges are growing, and they're growing at good rates, but they're still not reaching benchmark. And so we know that too, that as they get older, those gaps can increase, which does give some indication to when we hit 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, those gaps can increase, so we need to do a better job of catching them sooner, holding them up, and then getting them back to grade level. And if a student is 3 grades behind in 5th grade, by 8th grade, you're needing a grade and a half a year. So even if they're making a grade, 1.25 grades, that's a significant amount for somebody who's below grade level. It's got to be more, and it has to be overtime. Sally?
Can I just ask for a clarification, because there might be something that I'm not quite understanding. Are you still using the RIT scores
Yes.
as from one year to the other to measure growth, correct?
Yes.
Are those RIT scores considered absolute measurement, or are they on the sliding scale of the national performance?
The RIT score is an absolute
Okay.
measurement.
Okay,
The national range takes those RIT scores into account to create the bell curve,
okay,
right? And that's how you get your sliding scale. Now, but you know with a RIT score too, I can say it's an absolute measurement, but there is a standard error
right,
in and around that, right? So here's my RIT score, but there's still a range where it's here.
right, exactly.
It's not
And
that
is that
219
range
really
kind
is a
of-
220 to,
Right.
yeah.
And does that range get affected then by the national performance?
No,
No, so that stays the same, okay,
Yeah.
thank you, appreciate
Yeah.
that clarification.
that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So why both are true, right? We can have great growth and still we're not at benchmark yet. And so we need to be careful not to hone in just on those growth scores. And yeah, we want to celebrate that great growth, but we still have work to do. And then we know benchmark recovery, this is that collapse after grade one. And this is just a really honest slide that speaks to that benchmark recovery in those grades. And we know this is a national problem. This has been decades, right? Back to the reading panel of the 2000s, that when kids hit third grade, that's why third grade is the tipping point. If they're behind grade level at third grade, the statistics for getting kids back to grade level after third grade is not good. That's just a national statistical conclusion that we know, and we want to make sure that we are not just allowing that to be. It's harder, but there's no reason we can't set high expectations to buck that trend. So where we go next? Like I said, in terms of that achievement, we're targeting 60%, and that's a big goal. I can't state that enough. So we want to increase and we want to get there. We had one grade level below. Sixth grade reading was the one that was below 2019. So we really want to hone in on that. And then in terms of growth, that conditional growth as well. So we want to hit an achievement goal and really hone in on the conditional growth for those students and make sure that they're making a year's growth. And that's all grades. Priority 2 is 7th and 8th grade math. Like this has been that way for a while, and we've looked at it before, right? Our math scores at that, they were pretty flat, and then they dropped. They haven't rebounded from COVID the way others have at this level. And 7th and 8th grade math is a great conversation. It's fun, but it's complex. And Amy, we've talked about it for years because that's kind of the tipping point in and around the advanced math component, right? And when we're moving kids into algebra, into 8th grade, what does that mean for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math standards at that level? And in the 6th grade, 5th and 6th grade, we had an amazing conversation at the end of the year because they had some of their highest percentages of students moving into that area and being recommended for that algebra. But we're kicking that conversation back to make sure, okay, if a student qualifies for algebra into 8th grade, they're going from Math 7 into algebra. They've qualified for that, but they're skipping over Math 8. And so does that do something into our Math 8 PSAT scores that we're having conversation in and around to really bolster that? And all of our plan is in and around Tier 1. We've talked about that to make sure that our Tier 1 is solid and we know where those weaknesses are so we can improve.
And I do think that Lewis might have been that last class that from third grade on, they were bumped up so that that 8th grade year wouldn't be lost necessarily. So that was the conversation I liked to have with you about, because we came from Montessori where those kids could move in and out and practice in and out of 1 through 3 and then 4 through 6 at any time. And so you would see that kind of mathematic approach. And so when they had suggested that for Lewis, then I was like, okay, I kind of get it. And I wasn't 100% comfortable with it, but it worked for him.
Mhm.
So those are the conversations we've had a lot about math and how advanced placement for making sure, because even when he took PSATs, it was interesting that he was, not PSATs, that he didn't have all of the stuff from those prior years because they were so far behind him,
Yeah.
But, that conversation's a big,
And those recommendations for advanced placement comes from what scores? Is it from the
Yes.
scores? Okay.
Yep.
is it purely scores still, or is it?
No, it's
teacher recommendations as well? Okay.
It's a balance, and we actually created a whole new system at Oakstown this last year. We're really proud of it, and we started to roll it out, not only for those 1-level high achievers, but those 2-level high achievers that are multiple grade levels that that would look to almost 2-grade advancement. We probably have 3 to 4 kids every year that they're just exceptional math brains, right? And they don't come from the Merkel family, ever. But they're there, right? And so making sure we have a process that challenges them where they need to be, but also we're really cognizant of making sure that that foundation is there, that we're not just bumping them up and throwing them into something because they have a high score. We're making sure it's
Well,
really
it does come to kick 'em
standards-based and
in,
focused, almost from a Montessori model where you're proving that competency at every level, but still being able to.
And practicing it
Because
over
there
and
still is
over.
that linear aspect to math education.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, it does-
And Adam will talk about it too, is that what the SAT, a majority of that math component is heart of algebra. And so
Yes.
what we find with those kids is
They completely have
advance
forgotten that
past
stuff.
what's
Mhm.
making
Yeah.
on the
Yeah, yeah.
SAT. So sometimes they're the ones that need to come back and have to review the most.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they're just past it.
Yep. Yep, for sure.
So a couple of things we're also watching. 3rd and 4th grade math declined at the top. That very top band is a 1-year thing. We don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction, but conversation around. The flip side of that, and I didn't put this in here, I think there was something in your packet, is that all of those cohorts still gained. So the 4th grade score went down from 1 year to the next, but that group of kids that went from 3rd grade to 4th grade actually still gained. So we want to be cautious about assumptions around that. And then our high achievers are growing at normal rates. So they're growing at a year's growth, but we really feel like they could be doing more as well, and raising expectations for that as well. 4th grade reading was nearly flat, and so where are we with that? And then Acadians hasn't quite returned to pre-pandemic levels. I put that comma yet, because I think, and we've talked about it now for about 6 months, we're at an exciting point for our ELA where, again, all fits with our Tier 1. We have brand new common resources coming in that we'll be implementing with committed fidelity. And so the 74% composite is a 4-year recovery from last year because it had dropped, but we're still 4 points below 2019. And so we have our eye on that prize. And I think over the next 2 years, I think we're going to see, I think in and around grade 4 ELA, we're going to see some big growth because of our core work, our Tier 1 work, and the increase to fidelity. So specifically, our goals, that 56 to 65th%, we'll measure that. That's a SMART goal, right? We can measure that, and we can measure along the way. And then we talked with principals about this in the spring, was the recovery rate from 25.5 to 35%. That's an ambitious goal of 10%, not 9.5%, but are well below benchmark. Can we increase that recovery rate? Can we do better than a year's growth that we've had? And then improved K-8 mathematics. I want to be clear. We have great math teachers at the middle school. Your kids have had them, my kids had them.
For sure.
this is not a 7th and 8th grade problem. And so this is a vertical problem that our work, again, will help get us there. But we want to be ready for 8th grade math, which gets us ready for high school math. We know that.
Is there a set curriculum in the middle school that they use for math instruction? Yeah, what's the, is it a publisher?
In both grades, no. So they have developed their own, and they do a student book, a student workbook. They're doing math journals along with those things.
Okay.
So, and then again, just to link back, right, our Tier 1 focus, we know that better Tier 1 work will really drill us into what are those skills. Because this is the good to great component. Our scores are good. But to get to be that next level, our work has to be precise. And so, that's it. Extension for those proficient students as well. That's where we are. Reading gained in every cohort, and I'm going to use that as a transition over to Adam because I was really impressed with some things he pulled together in and around that cohort growth, and then other growth areas.
Can I just kind of wind back to the 6th grade math, that near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
You know, but, so if in the 7th and 8th grade, they've developed their own curriculum. And I used to do the same kind of thing in 6th grade using the composition books. They make their own journal, blah, 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 all these hands-on things. But then explain to me a little bit, how does PD look for them in terms of, I understand unpacking the standards, but then how do you take things that are not, tangibly written out necessarily, but have just been passed down from, the other math teachers in the building, to make it something that can be examined in terms of its highly effectiveness or how to attack problem areas, because clearly there's some problem areas, or to identify what the kids are not coming up to 7th grade with.
Yeah. Great question. So a couple of layers within that, and I will note, back in about 2022, this was a department decision to keep what they wanted, because I went to math and said, hey, you're up. Is it time to review and look at something new? And they looked around and they wanted to keep what they had, and we honored them in that decision. But the Tier 1 PLC work drives right into that. And I would adjust the verbiage a little bit in terms of curriculum. I would call that a resource, right? So our curriculum are our standards, so they're unpacking, they're diving into the standards, and then making sure that their common assessments, so the PD work is developing the common assessments to measure what students need to know and be able to do. And then once they have those common assessments, and they have those, but the PD work is analyzing that student data to be able to do some comparisons. So 6th grade math standard in and around ratios, if we know that that's low, we can compare that to our common assessment. And if we're averaging 75% proficiency on our common assessment, but our other standardized data is telling us we're at 45% on ratios, we have a problem. So our professional development then hones in on, we need to go back to that standard, because are we misunderstanding or misrepresenting what students need to know and be able to do, or is it a matter of how we're measuring it on our assessment? So that's how the professional development cycles into that, and will identify specific target standards-based areas.
And the language involved, because that's often a big driver of those differences, is the language.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's a good segue into a conversation that Ken and I just had last week Tuesday about looking at their data and, having conversations about how we've been able to use some of that PSAT, SAT data to look at the rigor of the kind of the questions that are being asked. Ken and his team have been looking at rigor the last couple of years when it comes to assessments, but the missing link that he kind of identified with me was that they hadn't been kind of transposing that on with like what the expectations of the PSAT 8 and above were. And so there's a whole test bank on the College Board of like breaking down by the different skills. You can look at problem questions, you can look at answers, there's explanations of answers in there. And I'll show here in a minute how we've used that at the high school level to, specifically in our English, to target an area in standard English conventions to grow that. But Scott's right, the work that we are doing of unpacking the standards, looking at the Michigan Anchor standards, looking at the SAT piece is a little bit, and at the secondary level, there's no great benchmark assessment to also look from a fall, spring. I mean, there's some out there, we've looked at some of them, we're working on it right now, but right now, I've yet to find one, I know that we're working on it, is being able to say, question by question, to break it down into SAT, PSAT skill, to be able to then go, hey, this is an expression of idea, this is a heart of algebra question, here's where you need to go. They give you general information, and the College Board is better than the M-STEP, I will say, in terms of the way they report, but I still think there's a more granular level that we can get to at the secondary level that would be instrumental in helping us understand how we can better instruct kids to get to that level of what they're being asked to do.
Using common language, AI, that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and we have used some of that.
Yeah.
Yep. So real quick before we jump on, you showed that drop from third grade to fourth grade, right? And you said, hey, this is a problem, that we know nationally, we have the same issue, right? How does our drop compare to what the national drop is? I mean, it's one thing to say, yep, everyone dips from this to this, or everyone's dropping, but is our drop worse? Is our drop, worse? Is our drop better? I mean, how are we comparing when we're looking?
We're still above national average in all of those areas.
I get that, right? But I mean, we're above national average, on the first through third, right? So I guess my point being, is that gap grow? Is our gap from third to fourth larger, smaller, or whatever than the national average's gap from third to fourth?
Smaller than national average.
Okay.
But it mirrors at a smaller scale. So that graph at the beginning that showed how by grade level we kind of drop, that's a national trend.
Yep.
Right? We don't drop as drastically,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
but it mirrors it on a smaller scale.
It's kind of like we're all on this slide in the playground.
Right.
The whole nation's on the slide, and we're all kind of slowly sinking down. It's just how fast are we sinking compared to some of the others?
Well, and that's going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Is that not everyone's sliding? When you're looking at average, not everyone's sliding. So those that are doing it well, right? What are they doing differently than we're not doing? And you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time to get things better. There's someone out there doing it better, right?
Yep.
What are they doing, and how do we look at that and mimic that? I don't know who it is locally, but I mean, do you guys have that type of data?
Yeah, what they're doing is what we're working through with our group. What they're doing is they are very clearly identifying, looking at each standard, what they want kids to know and be able to do. They're developing activities, using their resources in and around those. They have common assessments that they're using across all areas. Monthly, they're looking at that data and saying, where did we fall behind? Where are we missing? What do we need to do right now to move us in that direction? And then after a kid returns to their tier 1 from an intervention group, they're keeping them in the tier 1, where the work that they're doing in that space and around the standards and what the kids are able to tell you what they are able to do. In the schools that have had the greatest success, the staff know very clearly across the entire group what each grade level should be doing at each course level, at each subject area, how they're measured, and how that compares to other kids in their district and then across the state. And so that's the work that we're investing in, is how do we bring everybody back together and say, here are all of our standards. How do we understand what those are? How do we begin to measure those appropriately against each other, even in the midst of all of the work that we're doing, so that when you see that little bit of a bubble, that gap, that drop, that whatever that is, you can address it immediately.
Do we see that from building to building? Are we seeing these bubbles, these gaps, these
Yeah.
building, okay. All right.
So I
I guess I'm
don't
just wondering, because when I was
Based
thinking
on the
more,
specialists and what they're
Yeah.
doing, but
Yeah.
if
I was
I
thinking-
can tie
Yeah, please.
into
Yeah.
where I think you were going. So, for the last 2 years, at least, we've heard about Mississippi. What are they doing that makes it right? Because they're growing their test scores much faster than everybody else. So what are they doing? That's, obviously, they've hit
Yeah.
a particular way, whether it's the curriculum, professional development, or just the dollars, and I hate saying dollars because I think we just throw money and it's an easy answer. So what are they doing? I mean, are you using a benchmark similar to that, other than saying national, because I don't really care about the national. You should know that. How many times have I gotten pissed
I know
talking about
what
this?
Jason does.
no, that's why I was trying to get us on to that, to figure out where we were, actually, it'd be good.
And I don't-
Slide, yeah.
No, and it is a fair question, and I know Amy's right in the thick of it as well. People have looked at the Mississippi model and asked that question. So a couple of things, the legislature is mandating specific training. They are increasing some funding and some spending and having some mandates. Which is all great stuff, right? What it comes down to is exactly what John said, being laser focused on what students need to know and be able to do, and having the capacity to teach that in a specific grade. What they did in Mississippi was they had letters training for all teachers. It's very similar to what we did at Central when they started with URC. Everybody had the training, everybody was on board, and what happened to scores at Central? We saw what happened when they.
And I understand that, and unlocking the reading code is a unique thing, and I
So-
just, that's one of the let's not talk about that anymore. But what about phonics? I know Mississippi's gone back to phonics,
Yeah, that's all part of the letters training.
right? So
and
when
the
we go
specific-
into,
Yes.
exactly.
So again, next year, we're implementing a new resource. When we approved that resource, we talked about the foundational skills component and adding that intentionally. We'll have fidelity in and around that. So that's why I think in a couple of years, we're gonna see some significant increases.
Yeah, I would expect that. I mean, when you look at, there's data from Mississippi, but there's also pretty good data from states like Tennessee. And one of the big things that they looked at was, providing sort of a list of these are acceptable tier 1 core curriculums. And a lot of them did choose sort of the CKLA that we're using.
Yep.
I would suspect, like if I see kind of the data, what other schools do, I think we will see a pretty good impact with this new tier 1 core curriculum, particularly in that 3rd to 4th grade drop, because when you look at kids in 3rd and 4th grade with their reading, a lot more of their reading skills, I mean, like, yes, phonics is clearly important, but once you get to 3rd or 4th grade, there's a lot more about vocabulary, background knowledge, and so like, it's pretty easy to move kindergartners and 1st graders because you can explicitly teach them phonics and boom, they've got it. But when it gets into all this other stuff, it gets harder. So I'm like, what I would expect to see, I mean, like based on what I've seen in other states, is adding this new core curriculum once we get through like the implementation bumps, right? Because it's always hard to do something new. I think we will probably see a pretty big impact in the data there if it kind of follows what we see in other states and in other districts who've done something similar.
And I think if you look at our system as a whole, and you look at our high school scores as they've continued to grow and expand, our high school teachers do a great job, but they can't do it without the base that is put in place K-8, right? And even so, the data that we have and that we use for evaluation is our PSAT score. That's the 50% that our teachers all get, and they all get it because they all have an impact. The work you do as a kindergarten teacher impacts what happens at 1st, impacts what happens at 11th. And so even though we see these, and we've got to hone in and figure out where are we at, because if we want to go from great to greater, we have to figure that piece out. and we have to figure those parts out. But when you see the foundation that gets built and created, and you see the exceptional high school data that we have, even though, again, grades are greater, we've got work to do, that's the piece that we always try to lean into, right? That you can look at your individual data, and I recognize that in a lot of different places it doesn't feel great, and there are bubbles and there are pieces, but as a system, by the time they reach 11th and 12th grade, we've knocked it out of the park, which means that the work they're doing there, even though there may not be an immediate result that gives us a point or a point in time data point and one or two tests here and there, the long-term benefit gain academically is where we really try to focus in that additional effort as well. Because we have great teachers and we do a great job collectively, all 370 of us, driving that bus forward.
I don't know if this is a proper time to ask this question or not, but I also think that we have all of those supports in place, but that when Cummings came to talk about their student support volunteer initiative that they were doing, I do remember when we first came to this district, how kind of essential parents became also to that success of students, and pulling some of those kids out just to read in the hallway, kind of what our parents would do, but they would do it just for a teacher, or they would take on some of that work. And it'll be interesting to see how Cummings with that particular, it was so methodical, and it was so focused on not just coming in for a party or whatever. It was really coming in kind of where we were in 2014 when we moved here, because I can remember coming and going, the support that you have community-wide also is affecting those students. And so I think that it's all of this stuff, absolutely. But it'll be interesting to see with Cummings how they have purposefully invited parents to be a part of that process. It's so important. And I do think that that's been missing for several years now. I mean, we know why, but it would be very nice to see that, watch what Cummings is doing, and try to be kind of intentional about how can we use community. So it's multi-layered, and we know that the more your community is involved, the better your kids are going to do.
Absolutely. So it's a great point. Last thing before I turn it over, Jason, you brought up a good point, and I think I put it in the packet that I initially started to break down different buildings, but I didn't want this view to be that. We do have some variance among buildings. I'm going to say that here to this group. That's
natural.
It's nothing new, right? How many years? However, one of the exciting things about our work upcoming and our QPD plan is to intentionally bring those conversations together. So like John said, they can maintain some part of teaching and instruction and culture for their building, but as a grade level, there is still that laser focus and commonality in and around the standards and the learning. And so next year I presented with the QPD plan, we're starting with vocabulary for all grades next year, and that's really going to be interesting and exciting work, and we're going to see how that changes. So, high school.
Yeah. So a couple quick highlights. So this is our last 4 years of SAT. You'll see that while last year was one of our highest total mean scores, this year, while we took a dip from last year, it's still higher than we've been the 2 previous years. And if you notice too, Michigan and National also dropped from the previous year as well. So still great with that. One of the things that I specifically wanted to focus in on, and I know that Scott said, growth is part of the story, but this is a real success for this cohort that just took the SAT. So this year's seniors. So in comparison to our seniors who just graduated, our class of 2026 students, they had been high achieving all the way through, and as evidenced by that previous slide that I showed you guys where their total mean score was high. But from PSAT 8 all the way to taking SAT, they had a higher growth along those years. And to John's point that he just made, the system really explains how that was able to happen. And so really proud of this group to grow that much from 8th grade until they take their SAT on their junior year.
And also that class of 2026 is probably one of our smallest classes, is that right? And this is one of
Currently,
our
yes.
biggest ones?
Our this year's sophomore class will be our biggest one,
Our
but our
biggest
junior
class.
class is a good sized class. Or
Okay,
I guess
alright.
this year's senior class is.
Our
a good
senior,
size, yeah.
our incoming senior class,
Yeah.
so they were very small last year too, were they not?
Yeah, it was about 390-ish.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, that I wanted to hone in on is I highlighted the standard English conventions. So this is a testament to what targeted focus on, tier 1 instruction can do. So that group that was high, our 2026 seniors, they still performed on the standard English convention at 34% above benchmark. So they did well, but overall, they were at 34% on that benchmark. Our English teachers, specifically our junior year English teachers, did a fantastic job of looking back at usage and grammar and some of those English conventions and being intentional about reteaching those things and doing many lessons throughout the year, not just to cram right before the SAT, and make it a part of what they were doing throughout the year. And that's a testament to what they have done, because while this year's group, our class of 27 seniors, were lower from an overall mean, they had a higher growth in standard English conventions because of that targeted work that our teachers did. Like Scott said, not just to highlight everything, we know there are areas for us to continue to improve. What we are currently working on with math is being able to draw those skills back to that tier 1 instruction. And I think we already kind of hit it already, not to be redundant, that there is some things that some of those high achieving students have to go back to for some of those things. But we have been great about looking at how do we shift the thinking and try to teach those skills as reciprocal rather than a standalone thing, so they build and continue to build off one another. But we still got room to grow there. I just gave you guys this as just a way to kind of keep track. And as I mentioned, Ken and I were able to sit down and start to build the conversation of how we're going to use PSAT 8 at the middle school. So there's that, okay? From an AP standpoint, we administered the most amount of tests we've ever administered in Grandville High School history this year. So that's pretty awesome. So 1,041 students had, or exams were taken, not total students, but 1,041 exams were taken by our students this year. We're above the national average. We have 83% of all of our test takers earned college credit, which is a huge, awesome achievement, especially as cost for post-secondary continues to go up. I'm hearing more and more stories that I love to hear when I'm talking with graduates of, hey, I'm going to be done in 3 years, Mr. Langto. I'm going to be able to work towards my master's degree and still be able to be done. So that's a huge piece of success of the system. And then 14 of our classes passed at 80% or higher. So pretty proud of that. You can see here just our 5-year trend in terms of students scoring 3 or higher. So we continue to maintain from the previous year and outperform the previous 3 years. And then on the right is just a little snapshot of how many students took an AP test, which you'll note is the highest in that 5-year trend as well too. So we continue to grow the amount of students that are taking exams. We continue to grow the amount of exams the students are taking, which means we continue to grow the opportunities for students to earn college credit. And then, as John requested, to give you guys some demographic data of who was taking our our AP tests. That top stat there, just make sure you qualify that 25% or 27% of our students are taking AP tests. Note that really there's probably only one true AP test that freshmen could take, and that would be AP Computer Science Principles. So if you take the freshman class out of that number grows to probably closer to 50% of our students taking AP tests who could probably take a class that could qualify as an AP test. So, but proud of our AP things. We still have some growth areas on SAT, but as Scott said, the ability to have the conversation, to start to have these targeted pieces of what we would do to move this, that English conventions was an example of that. 2 years ago, we started giving our English and math teachers of freshmen, sophomore, and juniors scores of students of where they are going, to see where students are, if they're approaching benchmark, at benchmark, what they're doing, so they can also individualize that. And our teachers have reported that that's been wildly helpful, because sometimes students might present as someone who's doing well, and Scott kind of mentioned this on local assessments, but if they're not meeting the standardized benchmark, then what is the honest conversation we need to have about some of that local assessment and some of that local instruction?
You know, I'd kind of like to circle back a little bit to when Sherry GW was here speaking about need for more concentrated effort in getting some of our minority groups mentored, geared towards being able to participate a little bit more in these. And this data shows us, you know, what's going on with that. And you know, I just am wondering, I don't know what it looks like. I'm just wondering out loud, you know, what can we do before?
Yeah.
Proactively, to get kids to even think that they could possibly work towards taking AP classes and getting AP credit for whatever they want to do with it. And I guess I would like to see that be part of this plan too, because it's been an express need by our not only our teachers, but it clearly is an express need in this data too.
Well, and it's a great question, and I guess I'll have to go back to, I don't know exactly what the comments were previously, but the College Board recognized this several years ago in their equity and access initiative that they pushed. Usually the AP tests were paid for in the spring. They moved that payment up to the fall as a way to hopefully help with that equity and access piece. I will tell you, there's no financial barrier at Grandville High School for students taking an AP class. Senior Survivor has helped with that immensely with that student assistance fund.
That's awesome.
There is no barrier to students taking an AP class other than a prerequisite barrier, right? We have in the last 8 years tried to bump that conversation about honors classes, and you can only take AP if you take honors, and every year at 8th grade orientation, I make sure that you can take an honors class if you want to take an honors class. Even if your 8th grade teacher didn't recommend you for that, you can still take an honors class if you want to. So there is no, you can't do this. Obviously, there are things that better prepare students for the rigor of some of those classes. And, again, some of the prerequisites, you can't take AP Physics without taking calculus because you're just going to be as lost as I am in Mike Evley's class. But so while there's no structural barriers that are there, I still think we do need to investigate, and I don't have the answer to why certain individuals are not taking those classes or not.
Well, just go back to the philosophy of, your whole classroom instruction. It's, you put out the statement of I can and why. And maybe that simple premise is what needs to be used in addressing some of our kids of color in terms of you can do this, earlier on, why? Why would you want to do this? And just help them to see a little bit further down the steps. I remember as even a 6th grade teacher talking to my kids, why do they want to prepare for their math test? This was their score. Why do they want to achieve 3 more points? What is that going to mean to them? And just having those conversations and those dialogues sometimes can be transformative. Not always. It's not going to be for everybody. I don't expect that. But I just wonder if there's something that we can do that's going to be a little more.
Yeah, and I appreciate that perspective because we have tried to work into that. Like at our orientations, at our things, we talk about the benefit of taking one rigorous class throughout high school, specifically AP. We've added that in there through those conversations that Cherie has had with me, but also, just in terms of overall increasing those who take those classes. Additionally, we have tried to target, I'll give you computer science A, the more challenging computer science. Those of you who have been on the board for a couple of years, remember we brought computer science A to the board for approval. we thought this was going to completely take off, given our robotics background in this district and things like that. And we are struggling to get students to sign up for that course. And I've talked with Doug Hetfer about this. We've had conversations. We did a very intentional push this year from, counseling and things like that. We got into certain classes and talked with those things, and we still had about 5 kids sign up for it. So not to diminish like the conversation, I still think we need to do that, but it is to a point of sometimes you scratch your head at the complexity of this conversation because of the fact that we have tried to be very transparent that anyone can take a rigorous course, and we do try to challenge that. We've even tried to speak to the narrative about talking with our students about taking the M-STEP or taking the PSAT, instead of just saying like, it doesn't matter, like you don't have to do well on this, like no, like you're putting your name on this. It needs to be something that it is, because again, I think we mentioned it last time we were here, like while the PSAT, SAT is not everything for a student, it is a measure of saying, hey, you could be career college ready or college ready by at least doing this. And I've said to our staff, like, we can't determine in 8th grade or 9th grade or 10th grade or even 11th grade who is going to go to college or not. Maybe they go to career right after high school, and maybe afterwards they need to go back to college, but this is an ability for them to show that. So I think it's something that John and I need to definitely dig into with our student voice group specifically around this. And I think it's something that we need to lean on, others and figure out where we're at. But how can we shift this narrative? Not to beat the drum again, but I also think if we can continue to build up students from a lower level, to give them more,
100%.
give them more confidence, and then have that conversation, because a student who's taking algebra in 7th grade can get to AP pre-calc that now everyone junior year takes AP, or in the sequence it's likely junior year takes AP pre-calc. There's no prerequisite for AP pre-calc other than taking
It's
geometry
definitely
and algebra too.
nuanced. There is no doubt about
Yeah.
it. Just like any of our other scores, there's nuances that
Yeah.
have to be addressed.
But it's a good thing to start tracking too, and I think
Yeah.
that's why we wanted to start the
I appreciate
conversation.
that.
Yeah.
And
So,
the celebration that we've really held up for the last couple of years is that I don't think can be understated in terms of celebrating the success of our teachers and students, is we have increased our number and increased our success rate.
Yep.
So the more students that take the class, our teachers get them there.
the computer, it's an interesting dynamic.
It's
You
frustrating.
wonder, I almost wonder if you're into computers, you're 15 levels beyond what that's
Yes.
going to teach you anyway.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of people that are just like, hey, I'm just really interested in computers, right? That I don't really want to do all this other stuff that those other people that are 15, layers ahead of everyone else are. I don't know. It's just a weird dynamic, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
Even weirder that College Board now came out with a AP cybersecurity class. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, well, that's obviously very intriguing and very relevant, but are we gonna have the same?
Would
Yeah.
you have the same situation? Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna, again, hats off. Incredible scores, incredible numbers again. When it comes to Grandville High School, you guys have unlocked it. You know how to get the most out of students in the way that you offer the curriculum, the engagement of the teachers. It's all very, very obvious when you look at the scores. So, kudos, because that's, incredible. When it comes to, percentages and that, the one thing that's not even being taken into account here is what's the career path for some of these people? And I understand AP is the only one, but I'll say it again, whether my son and I will agree. I don't want my grandsons to go to college. I want them to go to a technical school and not have to deal with both the debt and in some cases, based on the career, the non-essential pieces of a 4 or 6 year college. So how many of our students are even thinking that? So when you look at those numbers, you could look at that as being pure, but I think there's so many factors that come into play that it's a Rubik's Cube. How do you know the answer to that?
It really is, because it was funny, I was listening to a podcast, and I think it was like the guy that founded BlackRock, and again, maybe it was Sam Altman as well, right? You know, two people that are, you know, one on top of the financial industry, one on top of AI, right? Guess what their degrees were? Philosophy. Right? So my point being is that some things that we think sometimes maybe, oh, it's extraneous and not necessarily, there's a lot of people at the very top of their industries that weren't necessarily coming directly into a technical. It was the ability to, I think critical thinking and so forth. So I know that I have the same, you know, question as you do, Bob, about, you know, with my kids, like, gosh, should I push one of them to become a plumber? Right? And I always say, listen, if someone would have sat me down in high school and said, you know what, Jason, you're smarter than the average bear, but you're not going to be the next Bill Gates. But if you want to become a plumber, after about 5 years, you may have 3 guys working for you because you're probably a little bit better on some of the other stuff, you know, the office stuff or the whatever, that, you know, you'd be charging them all at $100 an hour, right? You know, how they're busy as can be. I don't know. It's a strange. I don't know how to.
Well,
yeah.
I'm going to tie it into the fact of the computer programming piece. That whole thing, it's all where's the mindset of the student and how either their family is guiding them, the teachers are being able to reach them, and I just think for the human psyche, the human mind, we have the ability to harness a great deal of that by your scores. So again, kudos. There's too many unknowns in that. I take that with a grain of salt. I really do.
Wonder, and I appreciate the comment. I appreciate the Yogi Bear reference too. And I wonder. I mean, one of the things we don't have up here that we isolated it. I wish I had thought about it. Was including some of our CTE numbers, and I wonder if we could do that for next time, because again, a point of pride that's enough that we've talked about here is our expansion of CTE programming over the last 2 to 3 years, and Adam's been a giant champion of that. The problem with those, because we're required to collect them at the end of every year, and Mike Kennedy's always scurrying to get them, is, you know, those high school kids, once they're done, we're supposed to be able to collect data from them a year later, and that's not always easy or reliable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it'd be a good starting point, even just to recognize that it's not just all AP. And while, yes, we've been super successful there, we have been in other places too.
I'd like to ask one of the question on the SAT benchmark slide you had. One of my concerns, right, just something to notice, is yes, we're moving forward with our top 50%, but our third aren't moving.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, it's great that, you know, we got more people passing APs, but that group, we're not, I don't know, it feels like we're not making a huge, that's not the one, or maybe it's.
It's in our packet, I think.
Yeah, here we go.
This is the one, yeah.
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 Yep.
Yep.
And, I mean, here's an honest perspective, track that back to that 7th and 8th grade drop, right? That those kids that, I would hypothesize some disengagement at some point, and that's a young age.
When you look at the 7th and 8th building, okay, I'm gonna go there. How effective is PBIS? I'm gonna say negative. You can't convince me. You could stick me in a closet with somebody talking to me for 20 days. I'm still not gonna accept it. The other piece is, where's the employee satisfaction in the 7th and 8th building is in the tank. You got teachers that love what they do and love their teams. When you look at Oakstown, I talk to a lot of teachers over there. Everybody loves their teams. I don't hear that in the 7th, 8th building. And then, what factors does homework play into that? You know, we don't do homework in middle school. So, what are those factors that are playing into that can build success, right? Those are your building blocks for success. Where are they in the 7th, 8th building? You know, when Adam says, okay, that's where I'm going to do a lot of my work, you know, kudos. Again, I'll say it again. It's needed right there. It's needed there. Because once they get into the high school, you have a process, the staff, you can help those students be successful.
Yeah,
And hopefully that takes care of that lower.
Yeah.
Well, you also
Well,
have kids
but
that are still coming out of adolescence, so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having been a 7th and 8th grade teacher, having been a leader in that space, there's a whole lot more going on than just some of the pieces that were there. It is very much nuanced. Are there areas where that team, our high school team, our K-6 team need to grow? Absolutely there are. That's the work that we're landing in. As it relates to the number of kids that take AP classes, how they do on a standalone test here and there are a multitude of factors that we have to look at and understand. There are kids that don't take a bunch of AP classes because they want a higher GPA going into college, because it may impact their scholarship. We have a number of kids that don't take AP classes because they already took 1 or 2 AP classes and they wanted just a break. They don't want to take 4 or 5, 6 or 7. There are kids that don't take honors level classes because they're not confident. My son Luke refused to take an honors class. I signed him up for one. He dropped out midway through because he just said he was stupid, right? Same system, same kid, same teachers, same buildings, different kid.
Yep.
The work that we're investing in at the 7th and 8th grade building is looking at the assessments and how they align to standards, because they have been doing learning target work since 2003, because that's what I started in when I started there in 2003. Teresa Waterbury was learning targets. We did all the learning targets. I created a binder that had learning targets, aligned assessments, all of the things. Kids could tell us which standards they didn't do well on, but it doesn't translate out until not only the staff, the leadership group, everybody leans into that systemically. The system will always outweigh the individual as it leans into that, and that's where we've got to land. And the thing that has really helped at the high school is Vanderslice started this in 2013. When he became the principal, he made it a PLC high school. So the high school has been doing the actual PLC work and leaning into that work since 2013. Now it's time to bring the rest of the group into that space.
Okay, great.
I just want to make sure we're not forgetting about our 30.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
I just
100% will
wanna talk about
not.
it,
Yeah, we
'cause we can-
100% will not.
Yeah.
And Jason, to this, just, I mentioned it briefly, but the spreadsheets that I'm building for our math and English teachers, that approaching, we've talked a lot about, well, we definitely need to, get our students that did not meet, but that approaching level is oftentimes just a little bit of an extra, maybe that's a little tier 2, that's a little remedial work.
Yep.
And if we can get that group to get to benchmark,
Right.
that starts to be super big gains. And so we're seeing that with like that English standard and conventions. While it doesn't translate overall for their whole ERW score, we have started to figure out to say, here's a student who's at approaching, because I can tell you beyond that, we didn't have that information. We would just get this information. And that's why the teachers are saying it's super helpful to figure out where we're at and start to have some meaningful ways to shift them to the front.
Well, for sure, right? And it's again, when you were good from the approaching, to here, right? We're seeing that growth, which is good. My issue is just, the met none. It's not, we're not moving it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one. I just don't want us to forget about. That's a
And
good
that's where
start.
Mississippi made their biggest gains,
Yeah.
was by
Right.
focusing on
Well,
those lower
and
components.
Right.
The secondary reading and dyslexia law, I am genuinely interested to see how that intervention and that screening could help with some of this, because you talk about vocabulary, when we get to things like this, vocabulary matters a whole great deal.
Okay. All right.
Just real quick, just about the math, just to kind of go back to the math instruction, because I know we've been we're still piloting illustrative. And as we look, when I see kind of like our math scores, it does look like, wow, okay, so we have a pretty good chunk of kids who really aren't at that sort of fluent level with sort of kind of a variety of areas of math. And I'm wondering with your PD, just because I'm pretty familiar with illustrative math and what it looks like. And it's not really an explicit instruction type of curriculum. And so what I'm wondering is, how much are our teachers having to supplement. So like, for example, when I've taken sort of illustrative math content and I'm like, okay, they don't know any of these skills. So like going back and like supplementing direct instruction for every single sub-skill they need to do this little activity. Like I'm wondering how is that going to impact our teachers? Like, is this going to be harder because they're having to supplement so much?
Well, great question, and I don't think so because of the way our PLC time will be structured, that we'll have collaboration in and around that, and then our math focus is in and around numeracy work for this year, so we'll take that model and building in the instructional strategies to be able to do that. So they'll be collaborating in and around that. And one of the things that we've been learning and really focusing in on is direct instruction remediation. So we have a group that did the AVMR training. And we're working to scale that out. So not just in and around a resource, but we're building instructional capacity in and around how to teach those math strategies with direct instruction. Knowing that, hey, here's my small group that didn't get it. I need to pull them back and do a direct instruction model. So it's all going to be layered into that collaboration. And I think that's going to really be powerful for those teachers, and just in terms of building their efficacy as well, to know how to do that.
And I mean, what I find too, and this is just working with pre-service teachers, is so many of them are like, I know what explicit instruction is, and then I kind of get up and I was like, okay, let me show you, and they have no clue. Because I think it seems like it's easy, but it's really difficult. And so what I'm wondering is like, is there a need for some PD within those PLCs around this is because we do have a lot of new teachers coming in around how do you actually teach these concepts explicitly so that students
so we've
understand.
been intentional in building those strategies into our PLC time.
And that's some of the places where, as a building leader, if you're looking at your group and you're saying, man, we need some work in and around this, staff meeting time can be used for that. Or if we get together bi-monthly, every month, depending, hey, we're really struggling with this. Now we're PLCing around what are those things that we're struggling with, and what do we do? How do we build that out explicitly? And when I meet with our new teachers and I hear them say this is something that we're all really struggling with, that's another place where we've been very strategic in putting things in place middle of the year to help not just our new teachers, but all teachers. So we're regularly gathering input and feedback from our teachers to figure out what it is that they may or may not need at each place. And that's sort of where that AVMR came from, at least initially, and how does it work, and how do we roll that out if we need to? Because the thing that I've shared with our teachers is all the PLC work is the science of education, right? This is the what. The how is the artistry of it, right? So we had all the same notes, assignments, labs, assessments, but Melissa Susan taught that way different than Julie Murphy taught that way different than John Philo did. And I think that's the place where this work should provide our teachers with not only here's what you need to teach, here are the resources around what you can teach, and that gives you the chance to be your true teaching self, your true instructional self with support and guidance as we go through that. That's the long-term goal.
And I think that's what can make all the difference.
Of course.
It can just turn that tide and just enable those teachers to be empowered in that with all that they need. I think this is so key, and I'm just hoping and praying that that's exactly what's going to happen in your QPD.
We're very excited.
And we just have to remember that we're probably a 3 to 5 year process before we even feel like we've landed in a place where we've hit all of those standards, and at that point we have our assessments and we're starting to cycle back to the one that we were doing before, right? Because it's that never-ending cycle of where are our kids, what do we know, how do we assess that as a group, and what do we need to do to be very specific about our 30% that don't meet it.
I just want to say how much I appreciated seeing this report, including all the data, not only the where we are on that sliding scale, but also where we are in terms of the absolute scores. That's so important to me because I am concerned about our whole country. I know that our scores are slipping by 2 to 3 points, annually, and that's scary to me. And I don't want our educational system, our little corner of the world, to be a continued part of that. So I love the fact that we're looking at this realistically and say, no, we've got to like pull ourselves back up to this branch that is right here and should never move, you know? So thank you for that. I really, really appreciate that. I feel like this is the most genuine information that we've got. And my last little blurb is that I am so impressed with how our top end kids are doing. I think that's great. I think my grandkids are going to be, I'm so blessed with that. But my heart is also for all these kids who are not at that crow's nest, you know? And I still want us to do that hard work to get them to a place the best that they can be. You know, whatever that's going to be. They don't all need to be college students, not by any stretch, but to get them to be in a place where we can say that they're graduating with success. And I think that's still got to be our aim, to keep our eye on that. And I think that's what we'll see a lot of growth. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions? Good conversation.
Thanks, guys.
Really good conversation.
Thanks,
So a lot of what they talked about leans into my goals, which is that kind of discussion point. They're not different than what I shared last time, other than I added in the reporting pieces and the measurement parts of that. And so looking at the Tier 1 instruction, both K-6 and 7-12 separately, but in similar work, we'll identify their targets, develop formative assessments, and be able to look at that for at least 2 units of instruction, 7-12, and for all of the numeracy pieces and the vocabulary pieces, K-6, which I think is really important. On that second bullet point, it kind of leans into that dialogue in and around our intervention structure, right? So is what we're doing working? Are we overdoing it? Are we underdoing it? What other models might we be able to find? How does our MTSS system support the work that we're doing in a Tier 1 way that we may not need as much Tier 2? So we're going to look at that really closely and have a staffing plan, support plan for that spring of 2027 timeframe for you guys to take a look at and be able to see that piece of it. And then regular updates along the way. I started with our facilities team last week. We just kind of got together. It had been since January of 2024 since we had been together. So we just kind of did a recap of that, and we're going to get back together again in September and see what sort of direction we may want to go there. And again, you'll continue to receive regular updates in and around that, with the hope to have a 3 to 5 year plan in place by, again, spring of 2027. So any questions in and around, just from a timing, measurement, any of those things? You probably heard that much of what we're trying to do here aligns with what we're trying to do there, aligns with what we're trying to do with QPD and evaluation. Trying to string all of those things together and make that really apparent for our staff as well.
Do you share, that's what I was going to ask, do you share these directly with the staff?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
They're well defined, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we share them with the staff. And it's sort of like the district goals that we see in our school improvement plan impact my goals, which impact our principals' goals, which impact our teachers' goals, which impact. And so that's really the place that those get shared out. And so I'll share all of these with our building leaders tomorrow at our retreat. We'll talk through them, each one, how that may layer in for each of them. And we'll be selecting the first goal as one of their goals for their evaluation for this year. That we want to hold them accountable to. If I say this is what we're doing, it's also your goal, this is what we're doing. So I'm going to want to see evidence of 2 units of instruction. I want to see evidence at your grade level that you've been able to help move that needle forward. And so that's all part and parcel of kind of the layered structure that we want to put in place to ensure that we're not just creating the accountability, but also the flexibility. So the tight and loose nature of the work that you have to do as a leader that says, here's what we're doing, and here's where you get the artistry to kind of work your way through it with your group or with your team. So
I think that is one of my favorite ways that you describe that every time, with the artistry part, because that is, I think that's where so many current teachers don't always feel like they have that creativity part and that freedom. And so I love that way that you describe that for,
Yeah.
it's really scaffolding and, yeah.
I think the hard part about getting into resources, you feel like the resource is what you have to follow, and that's what we're supposed to teach them. The resource is what we're supposed to teach them, and it's just not the case anymore. There's never been a resource that anybody's ever found that covered the standards perfectly for any grade level or any subject level, and so that's the part where the engagement around what do we want them to do, and how do those resources align with it, and then how do we need to assess that is the critical part. And that's the cool, that's where it gets fun.
That's great. I like it. I feel the vision. You know what, wouldn't you say? I do. I feel that
Yeah,
vision
for sure.
that's being
That's very
spread
helpful.
overall. That's great. Thank you.
One thing, and it's not part of the goal, but it's just one of the things I want to keep an eye on as the year progresses. We've got a lot of people doing slash jobs. And, you know, and just want to make sure we don't have any, I don't want to say anything fall through the cracks, right? I have complete faith in everybody, but I know that in the past, in work, in my career, right, when you have too many slash jobs, right, some things do slip. And I just want to make sure we're keeping an eye on it. And I think you guys are doing it for the right reasons. I understand it. Just want to make sure that we've got those things covered.
First, I wasn't sure what you meant by slash job.
Well,
Neither was I.
Described it a little bit.
I got it.
I understood what you
Now I
meant.
get it.
As we talked about it, I'm like, oh, that's what he means. He means that Gelmi's doing this and this, and Adam's doing this and this, and John's doing this and this.
exactly, right?
Understood.
And, because it can become overwhelming, yeah, right? And sometimes we can miss things, so I just want to make sure, so,
I appreciate that.
yeah. Take care of yourselves. That's all. All right.
Awesome.
Good. Any other items? No public comment. So the next regular meeting of the Grandville Board of Education will be Monday, August 17th, 2026 at 7 p.m. at the Administration Building. We are adjourned.